Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and this is part one of my start-sit video for every game. Every game takes about 8 or 9 minutes, and I don't want to post a 2-hour video on YouTube. So let's split it into 2 parts on a weekly basis. Part 2 will be posted tonight for members only, and then it'll be posted publicly after Thursday Night Football, late Thursday. It'll be live. But if you want early access, join the Blunt Rotation, and you'll get that video as soon as it's available, probably around midnight tonight for members only if you want early access. The button is down below, but let's get it started. We're starting with teams on bye Thursday night and then all of the early Sunday games in this video. We're going to start with teams on bye. We have the Broncos, the Chargers, the Dolphins, and the Commanders on bye. Maybe not the most difficult defenses overall. The Dolphins are pretty easy, so are the Commanders, but the Broncos are pretty tough. And then the Chargers are sneaky difficult. Sometimes they don't show up like that Jags game, but on average, they are a difficult matchup. So that is good at times, bad. We are avoiding some big landmines. And then sadly, some good spots are not available this week. But honestly, the big problem with them being on bye is all the offensive players we're missing. There's a lot of good starters that are on bye this week. So not the worst bye week I've seen, but also definitely not the easiest. Going to be fun to see how it shakes out. But let us begin. We're talking about the first game of the week. The Bills are at the Texans on Thursday night. In terms of defenses, the Bills are actually really vulnerable against running backs. That's going to be a good spot for Woody Marks. And then the Texans are pretty tough across the board. They have been getting a little easier, though, for quarterbacks specifically, down to 22nd last 4 games. And it maybe isn't as difficult as this would indicate for Josh Allen. But players I'm obviously starting, obviously include Josh Allen. That's a no-brainer. After last week, you'd be a fool to bench him, and I apologize to anyone I told you to bench Allen for last week. I did not have him ranked at number 1, and the guy I had at number 1 fucking shit the bed. So sorry about that. Sorry about that last week. My bad. My bad. But Allen definitely in your lineup, despite a much more difficult matchup than the Buccaneers was. And then James Cook always in your lineup. The Texans, if they are vulnerable to any position, it would be running back. So I think James Cook might be catching some extra passes this week. That is where you can kind of exploit the Bills a little bit. But I still trust Nico Collins. If I have Nico Collins, I don't think I'm benching Nico Collins. He's been really good with Davis Mills. So kind of regardless of quarterback, Nico is the best weapon on the team. And I definitely trust his contributions to the offense. So got to start him if you have him. He is a top 10 wide receiver every week. And Woody Marks, I think, will be a solid start this week. Maybe more of a flex play, depending on the size of your league, depending on your depth. But if you look at these stats, the Bills are the second best matchup. You want to be upgrading running backs against Buffalo. Just look at Sean Tucker last week. Sadly, my rank on Rachaad White didn't quite pay off, but Sean Tucker fucking exploded. So Woody Marks has some upside. I don't think the Bills will be able to stop running backs too well. So could be a shootout, could be a lot of garbage time. I think Woody will contribute in the passing game, but everybody else I think is just a flex play at best. Dalton Schultz is not 100%, and then the Bills are the toughest matchup for tight ends this year. Bottom of the NFL, lowest points expected, so got to downgrade him a little bit. If not for the volume he was getting in recent history that's really been padding his stats, I wouldn't trust his floor at all, but he's pretty much guaranteed the second most targets in this offense, and even with Mills, that has been productive. So maybe on Thursday, the Bills defense sleeps on their opponent. On the road, they haven't quite been the same team. I could still see Dalton Schultz have value, but definitely just a flex play this week, not a locked-in top 10 starter. And then Jaden Higgins is starting to emerge. If there is a decent matchup here in the passing game, it's for wide receivers, not tight end. So I could see a game where Jaden Higgins actually more valuable than Schultz this week, but in general, he's a low-end flex play, but he is moving up my rankings. I do think my preseason take on Jaden Higgins is starting to look decent. It was terrible to start the year. He did have a slow start, but now that we're past the bye, in the last few games, he has been getting a lot more targets, and he's looking pretty legit. Almost had his second touchdown, was tackled like at the 1 yard line or pushed out of bounds. That could have been another touchdown. So Higgins, kind of interesting. If they do limit Nico, that could be valuable. But mainly I'm looking for garbage time, and I do think Higgins will contribute. But if you have Khalil Shakir, you're probably livid about last week. Negative yardage, while Tyrell Shavers and Ty Johnson, they pop off. Sadly, Khalil Shakir did not play well last week. But this matchup is terrible, so don't expect a massive bounce back. I'm trying to fade him. If I have the depth to bench Khalil Shakir, I would. Derek Stingley, probably going to lock him up, and I do not trust this matchup at all. Even aside from Stingley, the Texans can lock you down. So I just never trust to know where the ball is going in Buffalo. You know they're going to score points, but will it go elsewhere? More likely than not, it will. So I can't say I trust Shakir. I could argue that Jaden Higgins might be a better play this week, but I doubt I'd go that far. Shakir is still in the flex conversation as the safest Bills receiver, but last week spoke to the risk. You can't feel safe starting a Bills pass catcher. Dawson Knox, though, expected to get the start at tight end. Didn't quite contribute that much last week, but I don't think Kincaid is going to play. I'm assuming Kincaid will be out for Thursday's game. I think he may have already been ruled doubtful, if not out. So Knox, I think will get the start. Going to be a streaming option. Odds are I'll bench him, but the Texans stop receivers pretty well. The ball has to go elsewhere. I could still see a touchdown for Dawson Knox. But a player I'm really reluctant to endorse, I think I'd be embarrassed if I was actually starting him, but Nick Chubb is in this category of low-end desperation flex plays. I could see him have value if he finds the end zone, but odds are I would bench him. The matchup, though, indicates he does have upside. The Bills cannot stop running backs, and I could see Nick Chubb contribute. But I don't think I'd start him. I think I only trust Woody Marks. But let's talk about players I'm benching. I do not trust Keon Coleman, who looks to be active for this game, did miss last week, but I don't trust him. I know there's upside here, but it's so random, and he did play well last time we saw him, but did not play at all last week. And against the Texans in a bad matchup, I'm going to be fading those receivers. So no thank you with Keon Coleman. I'm also going to bench Ty Johnson, even though he had a great game last week. It all came on 3 touches. Do you really trust Ty Johnson to get more than 3 touches? I do not. And while he may offer a house call, I wouldn't bet on it. I'm going to bench Ty Johnson. But last week, he was my long shot. Last week, I did actually rank him in the flyer territory. It did pay off. But sadly, the guy I've been rooting for all summer and all season to be the true backup and have that upside is Ray Davis. And he's also getting like 2-3 touches per week. Last week, I think it was a bagel, though. And sadly, he's not getting that extra production like Ty Johnson is. But I'm going to bench the backup running back in Buffalo. Feels way too risky to endorse. But the quarterback, Davis Mills, I kind of wanted to put in the long shot category, but once you look at these stats for the Bills defense, what's weird is they're not a good defense. They don't really stop anyone at all. But in terms of fantasy points, they're really limiting opposing quarterbacks. I think it's because they're allowing so many touchdowns to the running back position. Like Sean Tucker had 3 touchdowns last week, and I think 2 of them were rushing touchdowns. Those could have gone to Baker and padded his numbers, helped save some of the stats. But I worry that'll happen. I could see Woody Marks vulture him. I could see Chubb vulture him. I also think it's an underrated, maybe a low-scoring game. So Davis Mills, not my favorite start. The matchup indicates he could put up bottom 5 numbers against Buffalo. They are not allowing many points to quarterbacks. But Xavier Hutchinson, not going to press my luck. Needs a touchdown. I'm not going to bet on it. And Christian Kirk, I think, has quickly faded to oblivion. Jaden Higgins is the guy I would want other than Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. But CJ Stroud ruled out, going to miss his 3rd game with that concussion. And I think if the game was on Sunday, he might play, but given it's on Thursday, quick turnaround time, that I think is the main reason why he's inactive. But worth monitoring, 3 games missed is a lot for a concussion. So could miss a 4th. I doubt it, but maybe next week he might not be back on the field yet. But Kincaid, I do not expect to play. I assume he's going to miss. So this lower side of the sit section is kind of like the injury ward. They do have value, but this week I would bench him. I do not expect Kincaid or Stroud to play. But I mentioned it briefly. I could see some sneaky upside in this matchup for the defenses. The Bills don't have a scary matchup. The Texans only have Nico Collins, really, who scares you. But their run defense is so bad, they've not played it the same on the road this year. I think I would bench them. I don't think it'll work out, but I could see them paying off in your lineup. I think I'd be embarrassed, though, to start Buffalo. Their defense has not quite had much upside. And the Texans are really valuable. They're really talented, but against Buffalo and Josh Allen, do you feel like it's worth it? I probably would bench the Texans as well. But those are my start sits for this game. I could see some sneaky offense. I actually think Davis Mills might shock us again, but I think I'm going to fade my pick for an upset. I took the Texans to win when I thought Stroud would play. Now, I don't think that'll happen. I think Allen will just win on Thursday night. So that's it for this game. Let's move on to the next one. Where in Chicago, I could see a sneaky shootout in this matchup. I do not trust the Steelers defense on the road. If you look at the stats, they're not good on the season. But if you look at their home games, they're a different beast altogether. This game is in Chicago, though, and I have not seen the Steelers defense really show up on the road. So I trust these stats. While there are some caveats, the asterisks on these stats, at least for running backs, is getting better. 19th actually ranks top 12 in the last month. The Steelers aren't quite stopping the run very well. And then against tight ends, it ranks top 3 on the year. But in the last month, it's down to number 12. Still good, but maybe not as elite as you might think. But every single stat, if you look at the last 4 games, would rank top 12. So quarterback gets an upgrade, receiver gets a really big upgrade, and I do think the Bears offense is a bit more tempting this week. But Chicago's defense is not good at all. They are really vulnerable. They were starting to look good against the run since the bye, but last few games they've stopped playing well in that department. So across the board, it's at least an average, if not above average, top 10 matchup. So I like just about every player to get a slight upgrade in this game, but then I also feel like it could be a sneaky low score given neither offense is that safe. But if there's one thing I know for a fact about Chicago, it's that they want to run the ball, and as long as DeAndre Swift is healthy, he's the guy you want. So I would be starting DeAndre Swift for sure. Maybe not a top 10 play against the Steelers, but not a matchup that scares you lately. Does rank top 12, and I think at worst he's a clear RB2 in your lineup. But sadly, Caleb Williams is a bit too up and down to like fully endorse with supreme confidence. I think you're probably going to start him, though. The Steelers being a good matchup here is indicative of some success, and we have seen like an elite ceiling at times. So this is a week where I don't see the Steelers defense really showing up very much. On the road, I don't trust them. So let's go with Caleb in our lineup. But Rome gets a good matchup here. I don't really trust him. The Bears passing game is really random and pivots from player to player every week. But I do think Rome in a good spot here. Top 5 matchup is a solid play. I would consider him an okay start. But this one, I think I might want to take back. The Steelers defense has been turnover prone at times, and that's where the upside lies. It's not like the Bears offense really gives you much confidence. Last week, they only dropped 19 against the Vikings. So I could see Pittsburgh play well, but honestly, I feel like this is a bad call in hindsight. I kind of want to move them to a different side of the board. They feel like more like a flex play than like a top 10 locked in play. Odds are I might not rank them actually top 10, but they do have talent. To pretend like they're not valuable at all, I think most of y'all who have them might be thinking to start them. But I think DK Metcalf is a little too uninspiring this season to actually endorse as a must start. So have him in the flex territory. The matchup against Chicago does not fear you. So he's typically in your lineup, but he's been really disappointing lately. The touchdowns have been evaporating, and without them, there's no upside. So just a flex play, not my favorite start, but probably rank him top 30 given the matchup is top 7. And then Jaylen Warren may not play, but reports indicate that Mike Tomlin is optimistic he will return to the lineup. He got banged up last week and Gainwell took over. I would much rather just see Kenny Gainwell on the field. I don't think Warren has the same fantasy upside, and he will split touches. He's not going to be 100%. So although the matchup's fine, I don't think he's a top 20 play. I think he's just a flex option in this game. Colston Loveland, though, gets a top 3 matchup for tight ends this year. It is down to number 12, and maybe Loveland is not as safe. Last week, I thought he was a good play, but Cole Kmet did emerge. So Loveland, I think, is still the one you'd rather have, but a little more tricky, just a flex play, in my opinion. But I think I'd rather have Loveland than DJ Moore. I know he's the future. Meanwhile, Moore is really up and down. And other than like one good game 2 weeks ago, he's really been a low floor, low ceiling type of play. Not offering much value, very few games with over 10 points. If all you're looking for is like 7, then fine. But that's not enough. That, I think, is a player that's losing you more games than not. So I don't want to fully endorse DJ Moore, but the matchup is good, so let's keep him in the flex conversation. But I don't think he's a good start. I think he's a pretty low-end option, in my opinion. But Kyle Monangai, also in that low-end flex territory, I do consider him a tier below guys like Warren and DK Metcalf. But you could tell me he's more valuable than DJ Moore and Loveland this week. I could see another touchdown for him. And the Steelers' run defense isn't as difficult as of late. So Monangai's interesting. He gets the volume to get at least like 12 carries every week, but needs a touchdown. And although this team loves to run the ball, they are pretty committed to DeAndre Swift. So not dying to start him, but not a terrible flex play, more of a bench stash. Will crack the top 40 though, if you're desperate, a low-end flex option. But the Bears defense, I think, is kind of somewhat tempting this week. The Rodgers health status is not guaranteed, and I could see Mason Rudolph as the starter and just shit the bed. Rudolph will probably offer at least one interception, and I have read that Jalen Johnson might be returning this season. I don't think it happens this week, but it is possible in the next month he does come back. So that's some good news, but at the moment, the Bears defense is a bit too porous. If it's not in division, I wouldn't upgrade them, but this matchup is not scary. The Steelers offense kind of sucks. So they're interesting, but I'd probably be embarrassed if I had the Bears as my best option off the wire this week. Probably not going to start them if I don't have to. But players I'm benching, I don't trust Burden yet. He is yet to emerge, but on occasion does have a deep shot waiting. Zacchaeus has gotten more volume, but is kind of a more cap ceiling type of player. So I'd rather swing for the fence with Burden, and I'd rather just bench both of them. So no thank you. Otherwise, every other player is for the Steelers, and I do not trust Caleb Johnson yet. He's not getting the volume, not enough, but I don't think they want to give up on him. I could see if Warren is banged up, he does contribute. In reality, though, the player to trust would be Kenny Gainwell. I feel like I'm probably ranking him a bit low. I feel like I kind of want to swap Gainwell with the Bears defense and have him in that low end flex territory. But it's all dependent on Warren's health. If Warren plays, I would not trust Kenny Gainwell. In terms of volume, I don't trust more than like 6 touches every week. So it's all dependent on whether or not he is the backup or the starter this week. It sounds like Warren may play, but if not, Gainwell probably has the highest contingent value on the wire this week. Definitely would be a must start if he's the starter. If Warren can't go, he's definitely top 20. So good luck there. I'm probably going to bench him though. I think Warren will play. And then I don't trust the tight end situation. Jonnu Smith or Freiermuth are kind of losing value to Darnell Washington, but honestly, all three are pretty gross. So not going to start either of them. I'm not really considering Washington yet. Calvin Austin is competing with Roman Wilson, and they're all kind of too random in Pittsburgh to bet on. No one really moves the needle enough. Even DK Metcalf is hard to trust, but the long shot for this game is Aaron Rodgers. He does own the Bears. He plays really well against them historically, and maybe he lights it up yet again, but there's also a chance he doesn't play at all, so not dying to start him. The matchup is top 10, but without touchdowns, he offers like no upside. Has no games this year with over 250 yards. That caps his upside. So gonna keep him on the bench most likely, but who knows? We could see another great performance against the Bears defense. And then because the Steelers are bad against tight ends, I do think Cole Kmet is the long shot for the Bears. Not gonna start him, but last week had more yards than Loveland. But Loveland did see more targets. So Kmet is banged up, not 100%. He does factor in, but not enough. Needs a deep shot to turn into a house call. Otherwise, has no value whatsoever. So those are my start sits for the Steelers and Bears game. My intuition tells me this game is going to be very low scoring. But if you told me Rodgers does play, he could play lights out. And I know Caleb really looks up to him. I would assume Caleb really steps up for the occasion. So if there's one I kind of want to take back, it's the Steelers call telling you to start him. However, I could also see them have a lot of turnovers in this matchup. But let us move on. Let's talk about Patriots at the Bengals. And the New England defense is pretty tough at stopping the run. So I do not trust Chase Brown this week. Otherwise, no one gets a big downgrade. And then against the Bengals, everyone gets a massive upgrade except receiver. The Bengals defense is just so bad elsewhere. Game script is really the only thing that holds back opposing receivers against Cincinnati. So I think I would 100% start Drake May. I might rank him in the top 5, if not top 3 this week. The Bengals are a top 2 matchup, and they're giving up a shit ton of fantasy points. In the last month, they actually do rank number 1 overall. So I like Drake May this week. Despite in week 11 only 1 touchdown, he still finished with like a decent floor. A lot of quarterbacks kind of shit the bed in week 11. So May didn't crack 20, but still had 17. That's useful when everybody else plays poorly. But T. Higgins with no Jamar Chase is a lock in the lineup. The Patriots aren't as good at stopping receivers, but they do have one elite corner, so Christian Gonzalez might limit him. But with no Jamar Chase, the volume will be probably like 12 plus targets, and I would expect T. Higgins to have a good game. So got to start him, but on this heater right now, Trayvon Henderson looks like a clear top 10, if not top 5 running back, and he has that league-winning upside I knew was there back in the summer. I drafted him like crazy on Underdog. He was my most drafted running back, and I'm so happy he's finally paying off. Hopefully those Underdog teams that start off slow that drafted him can sneak their way in to the playoff picture. If you have Trayvon and you make the playoffs, I think you're going to have a top 5 running back during that stretch. His schedule rest of the year is awesome, and this week against Cincinnati, it is the best matchup you can ask for. So fire up Trayvon with confidence. Love him this week. And Stephon Diggs, I also think, should be in your lineup. The Bengals are getting tougher against receivers, but like I mentioned, it's really just game script why they're a good defense in that department. I still think Diggs will play pretty well. May's going to play well, and his top target is Diggs, who had over 100 yards last week. I definitely trust Stephon Diggs. But if there's a player I expect to score a touchdown that's not Trayvon this week, it's Hunter Henry. The matchup against Cincinnati is elite, the best tight end matchup all year, and they have allowed 12 tight end touchdowns in 10 games. So a touchdown is essentially guaranteed. Unless he gets vultured by Austin Hooper, I would start Hunter Henry and expect a lot of points. Even if Hooper does score, I still think Henry will contribute on top of that. So start Hunter Henry, a definite upgrade against the Bengals. And then Andre Yoshivas is an interesting flex play with no Jamar Chase. He got suspended, so Yoshi will be running routes and is the number 2 wideout. He gets by far the better matchup, not against Christian Gonzalez. So could get open, could see some value down the field. I like his upside this week quite a bit. And then Noah Fant gets a top 11 matchup with no Jamar Chase. His volume will also increase. So similar to Yoshivas, he will avoid the toughest matchup. Noah Fant has some upside this week. Definitely a solid flex play at tight end. But Chase Brown, I'm downgrading significantly. I'm not going to test this New England matchup. They've given up 0 running back touchdowns in the last 4 games. I'm not expecting Brown to score. He rarely does that this season, and I don't think the efficiency will be high in this game. So I don't think Chase Brown is a lock in the lineup this week. I would ideally bench him. I respect the Pats' run defense, but if you're stuck as a flex play, I understand if you're desperate. But if Flacco gets the start, I would flex him. However, at the moment, I think it looks more likely that Joe Burrow will play. Last I saw, it looks like he's starting to practice, and odds are, given where they're at record-wise, I think they're going to miss the playoffs. But their division is so up for grabs, I suppose you could make a case for it. So Burrow, I think, will play. If he does, he is a must-start. Flacco, though, would be a flex play if he gets the start. So since I don't know exactly if that'll happen yet, let's just keep it how it is. I don't want to mix up the board I already set up. But in terms of the Patriots defense, I think they're a sneaky option this week. The Bengals do scare you, but without Jamar Chase and against this run defense, I don't see the offense being elite. I do think the Patriots have some flex appeal, but probably not top 10 in the rankings. Burrow's offense, still a little scary. This game could turn into a shootout pretty easily. So that's why I'm probably going to fade them, but still kind of tempting because there's no Jamar Chase. And then because it might be a shootout, a player I am upgrading that does have value right now is Mac Hollins. Feels embarrassing to endorse him, but does have value, undeniable. He has upside in this offense. So until Kayshon Boutte returns, I would expect him to be the number 2 target behind Diggs, at least at receiver. He might be behind Henry, but lately he has been seeing more targets. So not the worst plug and play. To be honest, I kind of like him in this matchup. But Ramondre, not going to trust him. I don't think he'll play, but even if he does, despite the matchup being good, I'm only going to bet on Travion Henderson. I expect Travion to see an avalanche of volume rest of the season. Demario Douglas, not going to trust him, especially as Booty gets a bit healthier. I think he is behind Mac Hollins on the depth chart. But Kyle Williams, definitely not going to start him. Only one good reception on the season. But with no Jamar Chase, Jermaine Burton, a player I liked back in the summer, might actually have some contributions here, but not safe enough to trust. I only expect Yoshivas to have any value off the wire. But if you told me he scored a touchdown, wouldn't be shocked. If Burrow is the starter, I would slide in Burton as the long shot in this game. But Samaje Perine is out. He missed last week. I don't think he'll play this game either. So Taj Brooks is behind Chase Brown. A terrible matchup, though. I will bench Taj Brooks. And the Bengals defense is probably the worst in the NFL this year, so no fucking chance I would start them. And against the Patriots, they're probably not even going to get any turnovers. So no upside whatsoever. Got to bench him, probably give you a negative against New England. And then Kayshon Boutte, I don't know if he's active this week, but at the moment, I'm assuming he'll miss again, so let's keep him in the injury ward. And then Jamar Chase is suspended, not injured, but not going to play. You cannot start him in this matchup. So sadly, he made a dumb mistake, and maybe if Burrow comes back, he'll have even more upside this year, but sadly, he's not available in this matchup. But Austin Hooper is my long shot for the New England Patriots. The Bengals matchup is just so good for tight ends, and I don't know if it's all going to Hunter Henry. We have seen Hooper at times contribute, but Burrow looks like he'll probably suit up. So like I mentioned, if he does, I would start him. I would rank him right next to May in the quarterback rankings. But that is it for this matchup. Let's move on to the next. And in Detroit, the Lions are hosting the New York Giants. The Giants defense is atrocious, abysmal this year, cannot stop anyone. They are a top 3 spot for quarterbacks and running backs, top 10 for wide receivers, and top 19 for tight ends. So basically everyone on the Lions you're already starting, but I would upgrade them as well. They get a good matchup here. And then for the Lions, their defense is pretty easy to throw against, but not to run against. They have the second toughest run defense in the NFL. So not going to trust those running backs, but I would think Jackson Dart is a solid play. So in terms of players I'm starting, no brainer would be Jahmyr Gibbs, a top 3 matchup against New York. So he, I think, will be ranked as my number 1 play this week. I think Gibbs will be lights out, not going to be stopped at home against the Giants. But Amon-Ra, always a lock in your lineup. Maybe not playing at a top 10 level right now. J-Mo's actually contributing a bit right now. But I do think the Eagles matchup was the main reason why. He should have a big bounce back, especially if Laporta misses again against the Giants. So got to start him. And because this matchup is top 3 for Jared Goff, he's playing at home, I would absolutely start Jared Goff. He is matchup dependent, but in one like this, I definitely expect more of an upside ceiling type of game from Goff. The only downside here is if he gets vultured by a bunch of rushing touchdowns. I wouldn't expect that, though. I think Goff will throw for at least 2 touchdowns and pay off with yardage. So going to start Goff, but I think Jackson Dart might have more upside given his rushing value. I think he's a safer floor play as well, but the matchup is definitely much better for Jared Goff. But it's still top 12 for Jackson Dart, and he's had elite value, especially on the ground. So I would still probably start Jackson Dart above Jared Goff. In a top 12 matchup, he should be in your lineup. It looks like he'll play. He's already returned to practice on Wednesday. So the concussion, still something to monitor, but I do expect him to play. And then at running back, even Dave Montgomery should be in your lineup. A top 3 matchup here, I expect him to torch the Giants as well. After last week where their offense was abysmal, I think they're going to bounce back and, if they can, drop 50 like they have it in the past. So at least 40 points on offense this week. I would expect a touchdown from both Montgomery and Gibbs. The Giants not going to stop the run game of the Lions. But Jamison Williams, I think a lock in your lineup right now, playing really well as Dan Campbell has taken over play calling. And if Laporta misses for the second week in a row, the volume's even more locked in. He might have more value than Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's played really well last 2 games. I would expect that to continue. I want to keep starting Jamison Williams. But in the flex, I have Wan'Dale Robinson. Even when he has a good matchup, he still is kind of just a flex play. He gets a lot of volume, but it isn't always down the field. And if he gives you another 7-catch, 50-yard performance. That's fine. It's not bad, but without a touchdown, you're a little disappointed. He's a very safe floor play, but kind of a cap ceiling option. Never going to rank him in the top 20. So just a good, solid flex play in this matchup. But I will acknowledge the Lions aren't actually a top 11 spot right now. They rank number 17 in the last month. It is a little more difficult for Wandale against Detroit. Their secondary is stepping up despite a bunch of injuries in that department. But Theo Johnson, I think, is a solid option as well, especially if Dart returns. His touchdown upside does increase. He did have one red zone target last week that just didn't connect with Winston, but otherwise didn't really play too well. He's not going to give you like 100 yards. He's not going to give you like 8 catches, but with Jackson Dart, he does have the chance to score not just one, but multiple touchdowns. I also think there could be some garbage time here that salvages Theo Johnson and Wandale's fantasy game. I think they're both solid flex plays with upside against Detroit. Their defense probably takes their foot off the gas in the second half, but I do kind of like the Lions defense this week. I would like them more if Jameis Winston was the quarterback, but still against Jackson Dart, I could still see, some desperation in the second half. I expect the Lions to really crush them, and as they get more desperate, there will be more chances at some interceptions with more pass attempts. So I think the Lions are kind of tempting. The fact they stopped the run so well is where I think they're a good floor play. I could see the final score being something like 43 to like 17. I don't think the Giants offense is going to be elite, but at times Jackson Dart makes you regret betting against him. I could see the Lions also blow up in your face, but they're interesting from a flex standpoint. They're not going to be ranked top 10, but I do think I'll probably have them top 20. But Devin Singletary is not getting as many touches as Tyrone Tracy, but when he does, they're more valuable. He is the guy in the red zone. So despite this being the second toughest matchup, I do think Devin Singletary has some value. I'm not going to dismiss him entirely, and I'm not going to start him. The matchup's just so bad, but I could understand being so desperate at running back that you are forced to start someone off the wire. And Singletary, I do think actually has more fantasy upside than Tyrone Tracy. So hoping for a touchdown, could be a shootout game, could get some garbage time. They use him in the red zone. I don't think I want to start him, but Singletary, I would rather plug in than Tyrone Tracy. I know Tracy's getting a few more touches, but they're not turning in to the same fantasy production as Singletary. So if you're someone that only cares about volume and that's the only thing you're going to bet on in fantasy, then go with Tracy over Singletary. But I don't want either of them this week. I don't like the matchup at all. I don't trust a touchdown. And if anything, Singletary is getting those looks on the goal line. So 6 points is critical. Without it, Tracy will suck. And that, I think, is the only saving grace for Singletary. But ideally, you're benching both of them. The Lions defense will lock both of them up. Not going to be good options at all. But Daniel Bellinger is an interesting option if you told me Darius Slayton remains out. Right now, Slayton is not expected to play, and Bellinger could contribute. He does get targeted at times. The Lions, though, are decent at stopping tight ends, so I'm not going to push it. I'm only going to trust Theo Johnson. I'll bench Daniel Bellinger, leave him on the wire. And then against the Lions offense, no fucking chance. I'm starting the Giants defense. Hell to the no, the Giants will give you a negative. But Brock Wright, I think, might be healthier this week. He did play last week, but not much volume. Without Laporta, I'm not trusting the Lions backup tight end. But Khalif Raymond did also contribute last week. I'm not going to trust him, though, at all. I will definitely bench him. And then Jameis Winston only has some appeal if Dart stays in the concussion protocol, but given Dart already started practicing, I would assume Winston is not going to play in this game. So no thanks with Jameis, but could have some upside in garbage time if he does get the start. I do think he has some flex appeal in a 2-quarterback league. But Slayton, I don't think will play, has missed the last couple games, and I don't think he's coming back, so not going to start him. And then Laporta didn't play either last week, so not assuming he's back, I think he will miss yet again. So given he's out of the lineup, that opens the door for somebody else to get targets. In general, it's mainly only going to Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra, but I could see Isaac Tesla perform well. I think the Lions are going to drop 40 plus points. So at least 5 touchdowns from their offense this week. I could see one of them going to Tesla, but in general, he never gets more than 1 or 2 targets. And if he does catch it, you're not going to get more than like 7 points. So no thanks with Isaac Tesla. I will fade him, but I could see a touchdown in his future in this matchup. But if I was going to get desperate, if I was going to get kind of crazy with it, I would go Isaiah Hodgins because Darius Slayton probably doesn't play. They need someone else to catch the ball other than Wandale and Theo Johnson. And I don't think Bo Collins is the guy to have any faith in. Bellinger has stepped up at times, but not getting enough volume to consider. Isaiah Hodgins was the next man up last week behind Slayton. So he's the long shot, but not going to push my luck there. I think the long shots in this game are pretty risky. Not going to go with either of them. But that's it for this matchup. I'm definitely trusting all of those elite Lions playmakers. But then in Green Bay, the Vikings are taking on the Packers. And just like the last divisional game for Minnesota, I could see a very heavy defensive battle, not many points on the scoreboard. So the Vikings defense is getting a bit better lately. There was a stretch a few weeks ago where they were really vulnerable against wide receivers, but last 2 games that has stopped, and the Vikings are back to a bottom 10 matchup against the pass. So not going to press my luck with a receiver other than Christian Watson, most likely. Watson, I think, is the only one we're starting, but the tight end matchup against the Vikings is the only good one here. Otherwise, they're all average or below average. Most matchups are bad here. So against Green Bay, I don't trust JJ McCarthy. That matchup for quarterbacks is bottom 6. And then against running backs, it has been getting easier. On the year, they started off really limiting the run. The Packers were like a bottom 5 matchup for running backs, but right now they're bottom 10. And if you look at just the last 4 games, they would rank top 11. It's actually a very good matchup for running backs right now. So maybe the Aaron Jones revenge game will pique your interest, but otherwise the only asterisk to mention is for the tight ends facing Green Bay. It started off as a top 5 matchup in the beginning of the year, but in the last 4 games, it's gotten really difficult. It's actually the toughest tight end matchup in the league in the last 4 games. So they started off so good, it still ranks average number 16 right now, but in recent history, you cannot get any traction if you're a tight end against the Packers. So I think this game will be heavy on the defense. I want to be starting both Green Bay and Minnesota. I do not trust the Packers offense this week. They've been lackluster all year, and the Vikings really step up on defense, especially in division. So going to be a low-scoring game. I see at least 1 turnover for both defenses. I like Minnesota in my lineup this week, and I like Green Bay as well as a top 10 play. I'd rather go with the Packers, but I still think Minnesota is a solid play. The main reason why I think Minnesota is decent is because Josh Jacobs is probably inactive. At the moment, he's still a toss-up, but I don't think it'll happen. I think they're going to save him for the Thanksgiving game against Detroit. If they need a tiebreaker in division, it's going to be against the Lions, not the Vikings. So I think they can win without him. I don't think they're going to push it, and I do not expect Josh Jacobs on the field. So given Tucker Kraft is also banged up, Jacobs is by far their best playmaker, and without him on the goal line, I'm not trusting as many touchdowns to hit. I could see the Packers settle for field goals quite often. So Jacobs, a critical piece, not going to play. The Vikings, I think, are going to be a solid top 10 start at defense this week. But reluctantly, I think I'm going to still keep starting Justin Jefferson. The volume is still there. So sadly, although the production's not really paying off, I think you have to start him. But he's not a top 10 receiver. Let's be honest. It's just not the same with McCarthy. And you can see it on his face. He's just not looking as happy this year with JJ McCarthy. So that was the main concern. Why I didn't draft him that often back in the summer. And sadly, he is not the same player, but I still think you have to start him. I think based on who he is, he can still pop off at any time. And it would feel pretty gross if I benched him and he had a good game. I still think it's coming. Inevitably, he'll find the end zone, but they're not quite hitting that often. I don't see much upside, but Jefferson, still a decent floor play, still top 20 at receiver. But Christian Watson had a great game last week and looks like by far the better option in terms of upside in this offense. Getz looks down the field, and until they bring Jaden Reed back off of the IR, I trust Watson to get the most volume. So gonna start Christian Watson. Last week was really encouraging, and while I would probably still go Justin Jefferson, I do think Watson will crack my top 25. So that's a player I'll start. The Vikings secondary is not the most scary matchup you can find, but Watson really just looking for some upside. His athleticism really gives him that potential to give you a house call. But at running back, I like Emmanuel Wilson in my lineup this week. The Vikings are a kind of difficult matchup, but not the toughest spot imaginable. And I just trust that volume will be there for Emmanuel Wilson. So if you tell me Jacobs starts practicing, then bench Emmanuel Wilson. I wouldn't trust him. The matchup cannot support two good running backs, but I do not trust Chris Brooks to overtake him. I wish we had Marshawn Lloyd healthy, but he's never been healthy, so Emmanuel Wilson is the guy you would want. So I would start him. I do think he'll be top 25 at running back, maybe crack my top 20, but really I think Aaron Jones is the running back who will have the best performance in this game. Aaron Jones is starting to get more volume now that he's healthy. He has been contributing in that offense a lot more. Last week, I believe he had 19 touches, 17 on the ground, and I think just 2 catches, but maybe it was more. I might be mixing him up with someone else. I know the volume was high, though. He had at least 17 overall touches last week. So I do think they want to get the ball out of McCarthy's hands if they can. And Aaron Jones looks like he's way more explosive than Mason right now. Still has a lot of burst, and it is a revenge game for Aaron Jones. And like I mentioned, the Packers' run defense is pretty bad lately. Ranks top 11 in terms of matchups last 4 games. So I would upgrade Aaron Jones enough to start him. I think he's not just a good flex play this week. I think he's a solid start at the position. I think him and Emmanuel Wilson will have top 25 value at running back. I would start both of them at running back this week. But Aaron Jones, I think, is the safer play by quite a bit. Jordan Addison, still getting volume, but without a touchdown last week, kind of burned you. So I still don't trust J.J. McCarthy, but Addison is really talented, and there aren't that many other targets in Minnesota for the ball to go. So he still kind of carries you in terms of volume. His target share is still high, but the efficiency is bad. McCarthy just caps the upside, so not a great play. I don't think he's the safest start, but odds are he has enough upside to keep flexing. He'll crack my top 30, most likely, but Romeo Doubs, I think, will be around the same spot in the ranks. The Vikings matchup is a little tough this year, but it's not that scary. I think Romeo Doubs is just so touchdown dependent. I'd rather just bet on Christian Watson. I only trust one Packers receiver every week, and it looks like Watson would be the guy right now. If Reed comes back as well, that would crater the value on Romeo Doubs. So losing value pretty fast, but at the moment, still a starting receiver, so still a flex play. And Jordan Love, I think, loses a lot of upside this week, but maybe they lean on the pass so heavy without Josh Jacobs, it does cover you. I would bet against it. The Vikings aren't a bad matchup, but I just don't trust Jordan Love in general. He'll be a low-end flex option, not going to start him in a one-quarterback league. But Jordan Mason gets a good matchup. The Packers are vulnerable against running backs right now. So I'd rather go Aaron Jones, but Mason did score a touchdown last week. It's always possible. He can always do it again, and that does offer some flex value. He's not the worst flex play, but odds are I'll bench him. I don't think he'll crack my top 25, but will hover inside my top 35. So not exactly sure where I'm going to rank him at this moment, but does have some upside. The matchup is top 11 in the last month. But despite the Vikings being a top 10 matchup for Luke Musgrave, I don't think they trust him. They gave a touchdown to Josh Wiley last week, and even a third tight end did catch a reception. So Musgrave is definitely the more valuable tight end, but he did lose his job for a reason to Tucker Kraft, and it's not just because Kraft is so good. I don't think Musgrave is as effective as they thought when they drafted him. They did take him above Kraft, so he is a bit of a disappointment. The job should have been his all along, and I don't like his production. Now that Kraft is gone, he's still not really contributing that much. So if you get more than 3 receptions, I'll be a bit surprised. I would not expect a touchdown for Musgrave. If it happens, that's pretty lucky. I wouldn't bet on it in my lineup. Matthew Golden also kind of banged up right now, not playing too well. Watson is definitely more involved than Matthew Golden. So not going to start him, definitely benching him, especially if Jaden Reed returns. But Dontavian Wicks, buried on the depth chart, not valuable enough to to trust. But JJ McCarthy gets a bottom 6 matchup this week against Green Bay in division. I do not trust him at all, and maybe there's a touchdown here, but last week he did not scramble. I didn't understand why he didn't run at all, and that I think really limited their offense. I think that should be part of his game. I don't think he's valuable if it doesn't come back to him. So that really limited his floor, and he's way too risky if he's not running for at least like 20, 30 yards every week. So gonna bench him for sure. The TJ Hawkinson experience also diminished under McCarthy, so not expecting a touchdown here. You might get like 30, 40 yards, but that's not enough. I'll bench TJ Hawkinson. A low value floor play at the position. Adam Thielen, also no upside this year, has not played well. I think he's probably going to retire at the end of the season. But Jacobs, I don't think will play, so got to bench him, sadly. I doubt he'll be active. And then one more week where I think Jaden Reed is still on IR because they play on Thursday. I don't think they're going to force him back against Minnesota Sunday when they face off against Detroit on Thursday. So expect him on Thanksgiving, but I don't think he's ready at this point in time just because they're being cautious and they don't want him to aggravate either of his two injuries. He has a broken collarbone that he's still recovering from and a foot injury that reportedly is fully healed. So Reed has upside, but until he comes back to the lineup, cannot start him. And Chris Brooks is my long shot candidate for Green Bay. I wanted to put Reed here, but I don't think he'll be active. So let's go Chris Brooks, who maybe will be more involved than Emmanuel Wilson. I only think you're getting vulture potential here. I would rather go Wilson than Chris Brooks. I doubt he'll have any value, but he is somewhat interesting. Not going to pretend he's irrelevant. Jalen Naylor had a big game 2 weeks ago, but not going to expect it. I don't think I'll ever take him out of the long shot category. In terms of Vikings, there's no other name that kind of qualifies. So no thank you with any of them. But in general, I'm trusting both defenses this week. Jefferson can stay in my lineup. Watson, I think, has earned a spot in my lineup. And then Aaron Jones, I think, is a good start against Green Bay. So is Emmanuel Wilson, thanks to volume for both of them. Let's move on, though. Let's talk about the Chiefs and Colts game. And I do really like this matchup for Travis Kelce. The Colts defense does give up top 5 numbers to the tight end position. So I think I'm definitely starting Travis Kelce. Otherwise, wide receivers have had success on the Colts this year. But all these stats, I think, kind of don't matter as much because now they have Sauce Gardner and they didn't have that caliber corner in the first place. So they also could get Charvarius Ward back this week off of the IR, and it is possible in a revenge spot he really limits them as well. So I actually think the Colts wide receiver matchup is a more difficult one, not top 10 in my opinion. So with Gardner, I would downgrade Rashee Rice a little bit, but for the Chiefs defense, they're a good one this year, bottom 12 in every category, if not worse. And I don't think Daniel Jones will have his best game of the year, given the season is kind of on the line for Kansas City. If they fall to 5-6, they're not eliminated yet, but it kind of feels like their season is over. So Daniel Jones, not my favorite start, but probably going to keep him in the lineup because of the shootout potential. Wide receivers, though, do struggle at times against Kansas City, especially number 1 wideouts. So Michael Pittman against Trent McDuffie, going to have a tough time. I could still see Downs and Pierce play well, though. Otherwise, tight ends have been getting better against the Chiefs lately. It does rank top 15, not 26th in the last 4 games. So let's talk about the players you're starting. Jonathan Taylor, a no-brainer, a lock in the lineup. If not RB1 this week, then RB2. And then Rashee Rice, despite Sauce Gardner, I think is still in your lineup. I don't think he'll be ranked outside my top 12. Too good production this season to fade. But Kelce, like I mentioned, gets a great matchup, so I'm definitely starting him. I would expect a touchdown against the Colts. And then I also think Tyler Warren plays really well against them too. The Chiefs are down to an average matchup against the position, and Warren has been a clear top 5 tight end this year, so got to start him. No chance you're benching Tyler Warren. Daniel Jones, though, I think will be closer to like quarterback 12 than quarterback 5. I think I want to fade him a little bit, but honestly, I think I'll still keep him in the lineup. This game could be ugly, but I also see a lot of upside for both offenses. If you told me it's like a 35-33 shootout, would not be shocked at all. I still find Daniel Jones kind of tempting. But I will be ranking Mahomes a bit higher. I do still think Mahomes is going to be a better play. I would expect more rushing stats for Mahomes. But last week, he didn't really contribute in that department. I was a bit shocked. And without it, you are not going to have the same upside if that continues. So good luck. The Colts defense probably gets better off the bye, but I'd still continue to start Pat Mahomes. And then Michael Pittman, I think, is just a flex play this week against Trent McDuffie in a bottom 5 matchup. I do respect that downgrade. So Michael Pittman's been great this year, but the touchdowns have started to fade a little bit as of late. I'm still likely keeping him in the lineup, but just as a flex, not going to rank him top 20 like I normally do. Josh Downs is effective, but last time we saw him put up a really bad game in a tough matchup against the Falcons. However, against the Chiefs, I could see Pittman really be limited and they have to look elsewhere. I do think Downs is still a solid flex play, but I'm probably ranking him back-to-back with Alec Pierce. I consider both of them very valuable flex options, and we have seen higher upside with Alec Pierce. He's more of a deep threat, but on occasion, it might not hit. However, in terms of yardage, he's been reliably giving you 50 plus almost all year. So I like both Pierce and Downs. I think they're all three solid flex plays this week, but Pittman in a downgrade opens the door for the other two. And then at running back, it looks like Pacheco will return to practice this week. So that is key. Their run game has been terrible without him, and I don't really trust him in the lineup. The Colts matchup isn't great, but it's not terrible to the point where I'm automatically going to bench him. So depending on your depth, he's a solid flex play. Some upside is definitely the case for him this year, but they need him. I don't like the run game at all without Pacheco. But Worthy, I don't really endorse this week. Just a low-end flex option. He's been really mediocre this season, not living up to expectation. His ceiling is kind of capped, let's be honest. So with Charvarius Ward potentially returning, I could see the second receiver also limited here. So they don't feel like the safest bet against the Colts. I'm probably benching Xavier Worthy, but he's probably ranked inside my top 40, given 4 teams are on bye. So low-end flex play, just hoping for a deep shot that it hasn't hit this year, so good luck there. And then the Colts, I also think, is kind of an interesting option at defense. Maybe I'm just a hater of Kansas City, but their offense is not quite right now. And then the Colts could really step up. If you tell me they get a turnover or two, for fantasy, they'll play well. So I see a decent floor this week from Indianapolis, but not elite upside. It could be a shootout as well. You could also get burned. So odds are I will bench them, but there is some value for Indy this week. And then I'm definitely benching Juju. His role is pretty much diminished entirely now that Rice is back, so not going to trust him. Tyquan also way too risky. No thank you with either of those receivers. Even Worthy and Hollywood feel too risky. But Noah Gray does get a great matchup. There is some tempting upside for a touchdown here, but never going to bet on him, so got to keep him on the waiver wire. And then the Chiefs defense against the Colts, fuck that. I'm not going to bet against Taylor and the Colts offense. So no way, Jose. They're not quite the same on the road outdoors, but there's no weather factoring in this week at all. So the Chiefs, not going to start him. Their defense isn't as good this season, but Brashard Smith going to be just the third stringer this week, so not going to expect anything from him. And Kareem Hunt could still score a touchdown, but unless Pacheco is out, no chance I'm starting Kareem Hunt. So just a low-end flex play, even if Pacheco doesn't suit up. Kareem Hunt, I wouldn't tell you is the safest start against Indianapolis, but odds are he'd score a touchdown more likely if Pacheco is out. Probably more of a flex option if Pacheco doesn't suit up. But Amir Abdullah, not going to start him behind Jonathan Taylor. No thank you. Neither with Tyler Goodson. If anything, I think they might be wanting to see what they have in DJ Giddens. But maybe at this point in time, given their playoff potential, they don't want to risk it with the rookie. He's my long shot, but I would not factor him in at all. So no thanks there. If I'm going to bet on anyone with just some desperation, it's going to be Hollywood Brown. There are instances where Mahomes really gets him going, especially in the red zone. They do look to him on occasions. But beyond the Colts offense in general, I'm fading most Chiefs players other than Rashee Rice, Kelsey, and Mahomes. I think the only one that's somewhat safe is Isaiah Pacheco. So no thank you with them. Let's move on to the next game, where in Tennessee, the Titans are hosting the Seahawks. And if you want an upgrade, pretty much everyone facing the Titans always plays well. They're a top 2 matchup for receivers, so fire up JSN. I think he's the number 1 receiver again this week. And then against running backs, it's also a great matchup if you're just chasing touchdowns against the Titans. But there is an asterisk on those stats. If you look at just the last month for the Titans, they're down to number 14 in terms of defensive matchups. Not as good, but still above average. Not scary. But against quarterbacks, they rank 13th on the year. But in the last month, oh boy, they are giving up. On defense, they rank as the 3rd biggest upgrade at the position in the last 4 games, giving up top 3 numbers to opposing quarterbacks. So start pretty much everyone with more confidence against the Titans. And against Seattle, their defense is pretty legit. Only good matchup is against the tight end position because their secondary is really strong everywhere else. So I think it's a obvious play with JSN. That one I don't need to explain too much. But Darnold, I think, will really benefit from his upgrade as well. I could see another receiver contribute. So I think Darnold is going to play lights out. He's not going to throw 4 interceptions like he did last week. And even with those interceptions, he still kind of played somewhat decent, but not enough touchdowns. He had none to speak of. So the upside wasn't there. The interceptions really limited all those yards though, but he did play somewhat well when you factor in they almost won the game. From an NFL standpoint, I think they gained some confidence with Darnold last week. So maybe it sounds counterintuitive, but I would expect a major bounce back against the Titans, a top 3 matchup. Darnold is a must start. Walker though, I think is going off. The Titans aren't scary, and Walker's talent I think will be on display. I could see a lot of yards this week out of Kenneth Walker. I do not fear Tennessee, and this feels like such a good spot for them. I think they're going to unload on offense. They're going to be dialing up a lot of interesting plays, and I expect the Seahawks to drop like 40 points on offense. I see a lot of touchdowns. I think Walker could have a field day. His upside is always higher than Charbonnet, and even if he doesn't score a touchdown, I think the floor is safe. I'm going to be starting Kenneth Walker. After last week's good game against the Rams in this good matchup, I want Walker in my lineup. But Seattle's defense is a no-brainer, definitely a top 5 matchup this week, so they are a lock in the lineup. I will rank them probably in the top 2, if not top 5. So keep the Seahawks in your lineup, definitely an upgrade against Tennessee, but I do think Charbonnet is a great flex play. I think Walker has more upside this week, but Charbonnet could also score multiple touchdowns. I think he'll also have a good game. The Titans have been a top 5 matchup this season. So touchdown I think is a safe bet, but I like Walker a little more this week. And then I also like AJ Barner. Barner's really contributing a solid part of this offense. In the passing game, other than JSN, there aren't that many players getting more targets. So Barner I think is a legit flex play at tight end. Not a big upgrade in terms of matchups, but just a good offense that he plays for and a lot of touchdown potential this week. I like Barner in the top 20 at the position. But Chigo Okonkwo gets a very good matchup, top 6. So he, I think, is the most interesting Titan to flex this week. And maybe you're not ever going to consider a Tennessee Titan. But the Seahawks have allowed a lot of points this year to opposing tight ends. So not expecting a touchdown, but there have been games where Okonkwo is giving you like 60 plus yards at times. And with Ridley going down, I would expect at least like 6 targets for Okonkwo. So solid tight end option. Not going to pretend like he doesn't have any value, but just limited upside. Not a must start. I'd rather go with AJ Barner. But at running back, I prefer Tyjae Spears in Tennessee. I think he has more upside, especially in full PPR leagues. But him and Pollard are in a big committee. It's not really going to change. So pick your poison. I don't like this matchup at all, though. I'm not dying to start either Tyjae Spears or Tony Pollard. But I do prefer Tyjae in terms of talent and upside. I think his is higher. So Tyjae will be ranked above Pollard, but both of them are just low-end flex plays. A bottom 6 matchup, I wouldn't expect a touchdown for either player, but volume is decent. You're still getting like a solid floor. If all you need is like 7 points, both guys usually offer that as a safety net. But player I'd be very embarrassed to start would be Chimera DK. He does factor into the flex conversation, but let's be honest, if he cracks the top 50, it's pretty impressive. I do not trust DK whatsoever, but he has been the most productive of those rookie receivers in Tennessee with Ridley missing time. So DK, I think, is the only one I would consider, and maybe his volume does go up enough to be a solid flex option rest of the season. But I'll pass. I see higher upside with other names on the wire. I think I'll leave him alone, but he will get enough volume to factor in to the rankings. But Cooper Kupp, I don't think this is the game where I'm going to expect him to pop off. He almost had 2 different touchdowns last week. One of them bounced off the turf into his hands, didn't count. And then the second one, he got tackled at the 1-yard line. So Cooper Kupp almost had that revenge game I was hoping for, but just did not find pay dirt. And against the Titans, it just doesn't mean the same. I don't expect them to force this veteran into the lineup when they're going to be leading pretty heavy, no doubt. But he does have a lot of targets down the field. He has high yards per reception numbers in the last few games. It's possible you get a house call, but not going to start him. Definitely going to bench him. Also going to bench Elijah Arroyo. I only trust Barner of the 2. And then the Titans defense is probably the dumbest defense to start this week. The Seahawks are going to drop probably 35, 40 points on the Titans. So no chance in hell. I'm starting them. Cam Ward, also a tough matchup here. Not going to start him. There's never any touchdowns in the Titans offense, so no thanks with him. Ayamanor, I don't trust DK, but I trust DK more than him, so definitely benching Elik Ayamanor. And then Van Jefferson scored a touchdown last week, but otherwise does nothing. Even with a touchdown, you're not getting more than 8 points. So no thank you with Van Jefferson. And sadly, Torrey Horton still likely going to miss time with an injury, but probably going to come back at some point. Their receiving core will be deeper when he's back. But Ridley got hurt again last week. I believe he broke his fibula at 30 years old. This season was always destined to be a bad one. But Gunnar Helm is my long shot for Tennessee. It's a good matchup for tight ends against Seattle, and Gunnar Helm is factoring in. If you tell me Okonkwo does not get the touchdown, I think it's more likely going to Gunnar Helm than anyone else. The Seahawks will be vulnerable to tight ends, and there will be garbage time, so Gunnar Helm going to get some volume in the second half, could turn in to a late game touchdown. That means nothing in fantasy, but Rashid Shaheed, I think, has some upside this week. Against Tennessee, you know they're going to cruise to victory. So given he's new to the team, I could see this as an opportunity for them to try and establish chemistry with Darnold. The matchup is great for receivers. The Titans are going to give up some deep plays, and Darnold will take his shot. So Shaheed has been running routes, has been getting looks. He hasn't done anything yet, but in this game against the Titans, there's a lot of room for error. They will gamble down the field with Shaheed. So one of them could be a house call. If we had seen any production in Seattle from him so far, I would probably rank him as a solid flex play, but we haven't, so that's why he's really risky. But in DFS, I actually like his upside a lot. I think he's much more compelling of a start than Chimera DK, but obviously DK is more available on the waiver wire. So good luck. I could see this blow up in your face for a bagel, but I could also see it explode for like 15, 20 plus points, because a house call I think will be dialed up, at least in the play calling, for Shaheed. It might not click, but if it does, the value I think is very high for Shaheed this week. He is boom bust, and this week has potential to boom. But that is it for this matchup. Those are all of my start set decisions. If you do not have a Seattle Seahawk, odds are I'm going to bench him. All of the Titans, with the exception of Okonkwo, I think are going to be on your bench. Even Tajay and Pollard are very low-end flex plays. I'm probably passing on every Titan in this matchup. Next game to mention is the Ravens hosting the Jets, and don't let this chart at the top fool you. The Ravens are actually a very difficult matchup as of late. Every matchup stat has an asterisk on it, except for tight end, which is already kind of tough. So for quarterbacks on the year, it is top 20. However, in the last month, it's down to number 28. It would rank as a bottom 5 matchup for quarterbacks against Baltimore. They are really clamping down on defense as their back is against the wall. So the Ravens are going to limit Tyrod Taylor. Justin Fields got benched, and then there's really no upside for the running back position. I know the matchup says top 10 on the year, but in the last month, the Ravens are also a bottom 5 matchup, ranks number 28, just like quarterback, a big, big downgrade against the position. So Breece Hall, I don't think will score a touchdown this week, has no upside. And then against Wide receivers, it is top 6 on the year, but in the last month also getting tougher, down to league average, ranks 15th in terms of fantasy points. So not a good spot across the board. In every category, the Ravens are a downgrade. Not going to trust any Jet to get more value this week. But the Jets defense is a good spot here, especially for quarterbacks. It ranks top 10, and Lamar is always in your lineup, but should have a bounce back game against the Jets. Otherwise, the running back matchup does rank top 10 in the last month. They also traded away Quinnen Williams, so that defensive line isn't as scary. I would upgrade Derrick Henry considerably in this game. The wide receiver matchup is also getting better, ranks top 12 in the last month. They also traded away Sauce Gardner, so that's definitely getting easier. And then lastly, tight end is 21st, a bottom 12 matchup, but still not that scary overall. So in terms of players I'm starting, I know Lamar wasn't very good last week, but I would expect a big bounce back on offense here and probably an opportunity for a get-right game. I trust that at home, Lamar Jackson will be a must-start in the top 10, but I could see him not play as well as we would expect. I don't think he's a lock to be top 3 anymore, because if you're watching him since the injury, even every game this year, he's not running as much as we remember. He's not trying to run it as often. I don't think he wants to get hit. So he's saving himself for the playoffs. Very wise decision. I like their chances if they do make the playoffs, but given their status in division, their record this year, there is no room for error. They can't afford to lose him. I understand why he's not scrambling and running as much. So Lamar, maybe not the same upside, but against the Jets, he will be a top 10 play, no doubt about it. And so will the Ravens defense. The Jets offense is abysmal, and with no Garrett Wilson, the upside is completely gone. And then they also benched Justin Fields. So I don't think that's going to help them. I don't think the offense will look better under Tyrod Taylor. If anything, they might not give up a turnover as likely, but still it's going to look gross as fuck with the Jets offense. So Ravens been playing lights out lately. They're a must start, definitely top 10, if not top 5. And then Mark Andrews has been playing well despite fading him last week. I didn't expect a rushing touchdown. He did still cover you. Was a good play. So I apologize for ranking Andrews so low. That touchdown I didn't see coming. And otherwise, he wasn't great, but he's been pretty productive all year. He's not going anywhere. He is not washed. He still has value. So going to start him in fantasy. I think he's still a top 10, at worst, top 12 tight end. And then Derrick Henry, I think, will have a great game against the Jets. The matchup is getting better lately, ranks top 10, not just number 13. So Henry popped off last week, had a great game with a touchdown. Henry, if he can get back in the end zone consistently, will get back in the top 10 at the position. So odds are that's what he'll be this week. I would start Derrick Henry. And then Zay Flowers, I'm definitely starting against the Jets. Their secondary's pretty bogus lately, especially with no Gardner. No one scares you. And Flowers, even in bad matchups, even in bad weather, has been really safe this year, an average of like 60, 70 yards every single week. As a floor, Flowers is pretty safe. So there was volatility with him for a while. It seems to be gone. His role in the offense is on lock. It also helps that Bateman did miss last week. If Bateman misses again, then Flowers probably gets like 11, 12 targets in this matchup. So love Flowers. Only risk here is if they put up so many points, they bench him in the fourth quarter and he does not take part in those touchdowns. If they don't share, maybe the starters aren't on the field in the fourth quarter. But Breece Hall, I am fading heavy this week. The Ravens run defense ranks bottom 5. In fantasy, you're not getting good numbers against the Ravens. So although all of them are going to Breece Hall, there's no other player in the backfield that factors in enough to vulture those touches. I still don't want to upgrade Breece. He's very touchdown dependent this year, and in a matchup like this, I'm not expecting him to find the end zone. The offense is so predictable. Without Garrett Wilson, every box will be stacked, and Breece is not going to get enough production near the goal line to pay off. So not expecting a touchdown, not expecting much efficiency. I think you'll get like 80 yards max, and that's going to be a lot of garbage time. And even that feels a bit optimistic. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes with less than 60 yards, even less than 50 on the game. So hoping for some PPR production that should go up with Tyrod Taylor, but that's the only upside here, the only silver lining. I would bet against Brees in the top 20 this week. Not a good matchup whatsoever. But Mason Taylor, I'd be very embarrassed if that was my best option at tight end. Because it's tight end, the bar is so low. So you could consider flexing him, especially without Garrett Wilson. Tyrod should throw him the ball a little bit more, but don't like the matchup, don't like the upside. I don't think it's worth it. I would probably just bench Mason Taylor, but if you tell me he gets like 7-8 targets this week, I wouldn't be that surprised. There is potentially a decent floor, but I'm not going to project a touchdown for Mason Taylor. Even Jeremy Ruckert has been getting involved and capping his value in this offense. But players I'm benching include the quarterback for the Jets. That's always a no-brainer. A player to bench. Tyrod will get the start, but I don't think he has value against Baltimore. Not a good matchup, so not going to trust him whatsoever. And then A.D. Mitchell not proving himself at all yet, so I'm not going to trust him. He is a starting receiver, though. Worth mentioning, but definitely a player to bench. But Isaiah Davis not getting any value. It's only Brees in this backfield, and the matchup's bad. No upside with Isaiah Davis. But the Jets, I'm not going to start against the Ravens. Their offense has not quite looked ready for prime time, but at some point that'll change. Against Lamar Jackson, I'm not going to start the Jets defense. But Keaton Mitchell, not going to see the same volume because Justice Hill, I think, will play. I think he's off the injury report already. So Justice Hill could have some upside, especially in garbage time, but going to be benching both Justice and Keaton Mitchell. Given Hill just missed time, it's possible his volume isn't amazing, given they definitely want to save him for the playoffs. So maybe Keaton does get another 9 touches again, but I wouldn't trust him. No thank you against the Jets. There is some upside, though. I could see a little value in garbage time. But Rashad Bateman missed the game last week. I'm not sure if he'll play, so let's bench him again. Let's assume he's inactive. But even if he plays, I wouldn't feel confident starting him. And then Garrett Wilson's on IR. Not sure when he's coming back. Probably out for the year. So might be the last time I show you him on the video here, but I just wanted to mention it. Definitely bench Garrett Wilson. But my long shot for the Jets is the receiver filling in for him. It's John Mechie, a player I'm happy to see still in the league, but not going to feel safe enough in my lineup. The Ravens matchup's getting tougher. It is okay for receivers against the Ravens, but not good enough where I'm dying to do it. But he scored a touchdown last week on 3 targets, caught all 3 of them. I expect his volume to be going up. And with Taylor, maybe the offense is competent. Maybe I'm underestimating them a little bit. So on my radar, but not ready to pick him up or start him. Definitely don't do that. But in DFS, maybe John Mechie has some value. Isaiah Likely could also have value. I could see this game getting really out of hand quickly. And if they're heavily in the lead, why not get this player going? They need him in the playoffs. He has a lot of upside, a lot of explosiveness, and I could see the Jets really struggle to tackle him. So he just needs the volume. If the volume targets go in his direction, then he will have a great game. But that just hasn't happened yet. Love his upside down the stretch, but until we see any level of floor, you can't start him. This could be one of those games, though, where they start to get him going in the offense. So good luck there, but I'll pass. I would leave him on the waiver wire. That's it for part 1. All of the early morning games on Sunday and Thursday night were checked off. And so if you're looking for later Sunday games or primetime matchups Sunday night and Monday night, that'll be in part 2 or early access for the blunt rotation tonight. Should be posted around midnight, give or take, something like that. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'm Adam Riancho. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.